Have you ever been jolted awake in the dead of night by a sound so sharp it makes your heart stop? That's exactly what happened to me when I heard the distinct clank of my chicken coop door slamming shut. At first, I thought maybe it was the wind, but when I looked out my window, the sight nearly made me choke on my own breath. There she was, Karen, the queen of HOA complaints, creeping around my chicken coop in the middle of the night like some kind of poultry thief. This wasn't the first time she had caused problems. Karen was infamous in the neighborhood for enforcing ridiculous rules that didn't even exist in our HOA handbook. One week she demanded I repaint my mailbox because the shade of black was too gloomy. The next week she tried to fine me for excessive clucking after my hens laid eggs at sunrise. But sneaking into my backyard? That was new territory, and it was about to push me way past my breaking point. I grabbed my flashlight and stormed outside, the beam cutting through the dark like a sword. The chickens were in a frenzy, feathers flying, clucks echoing into the night. And there, bent over with both hands in the nesting box, was Karen. She looked up at me, startled like a raccoon caught with its paw in the trash. "What in the world are you doing in my chicken coop?" I shouted, my voice sharper than the cold air. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she straightened her blouse, brushed a stray feather from her hair, and said with a smug smile, "I'm making sure your hens aren't diseased. The HOA has the right to inspect." My jaw nearly hit the ground. Inspect? At midnight, without permission? She wasn't making sense. This was pure trespassing. I took a step closer, and the chickens scurried around her feet, pecking at her shoes like they knew she didn't belong there. "Karen, you're trespassing. Get out now before I call the cops." But instead of leaving, she folded her arms and actually laughed. "Oh, please. The HOA will back me up. You'll thank me later." That's when it clicked. Karen truly believed she could waltz onto my property whenever she pleased, even if it meant breaking into a locked chicken coop. And in that moment, as ridiculous as it sounds, an idea sparked in my head. If Karen wanted to act like she owned my chickens, maybe it was time she learned what it was like to be treated like one. The more I stared at Karen standing there in my coop, the more I realized she wasn't just trespassing. She was daring me to challenge her. Her smug grin told me she thought she was untouchable, that the HOA was her personal army. But what she didn't realize was that this time she'd crossed a line that no neighborhood rule could excuse. I swung the coop door shut with a loud thud. Karen's eyes widened as the lock clicked in place. For the first time, I saw a crack in her confidence. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, rattling the wire mesh. I kept my tone calm, almost mocking. "If you're so concerned about my chickens, maybe you should spend some quality time with them. Consider it an educational program." The hens, still ruffled from her intrusion, began circling around her. One brave Rhode Island red gave a sharp peck at her ankle. Karen jumped, flailing her arms. "Get these filthy birds off me." I leaned against the fence, arms crossed. "Funny, you called them filthy, but you wanted to inspect them. What's the matter? Don't like being part of the flock?" She glared at me, feathers stuck to her blouse. "This is illegal. I'll have you arrested." I chuckled. "Illegal, Karen? You broke into my property in the middle of the night, and now you're worried about laws?" The chickens clucked in chorus, almost as if they were mocking her, too. One hopped onto a low roosting bar right beside her head, flapping its wings wildly. Karen ducked, stumbling back into the nesting boxes, sending a fresh egg rolling across the floor. "You listen here," she hissed. I cut her off. The HOA doesn't control my chickens, and they definitely don't control what happens when someone trespasses. She tried to compose herself, but the sight was too absurd, her designer flats covered in straw, her perfectly styled hair now dangling with downy feathers, her voice cracking as the hens closed in tighter. For once, the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood looked less like a ruler and more like, well, one of the hens she claimed authority over. I pulled out my phone, pretending to dial. Should I call the police, or maybe the farmer's market? You'd fit right in as livestock. Her face turned beet red. She grabbed the wire door and shook it violently. Let me out. I smiled, savoring every second. Not until you learn what it means to respect boundaries. Tonight, Karen, you're one of the flock. The chickens erupted into a flurry of clucks, as if cheering me on. And Karen, red-faced and cornered, realized she wasn't in control anymore. I was. For the first few minutes, Karen tried to hold on to her dignity, standing stiffly in the middle of the coop like she was above it all. But chickens don't care about pride. They care about territory. And the moment Karen became part of their space, she became part of their pecking order. My rooster, a fiery little guy named Rusty, strutted forward, his chest puffed out, feathers gleaming under the flashlight beam, spurs clicking on the wooden floor. Karen froze. "What is that thing doing?" she stammered. I grinned. "Oh, that's Rusty. He's very protective of his hens. Don't worry, if you behave, he might let you stay." Rusty let out a sharp crow that made Karen nearly trip backward into the straw. The hens clucked and shuffled closer, forming a circle around her. It was almost ceremonial, like they were welcoming her into the pecking order, whether she wanted it or not. "Make them stop. This is harassment." Karen yelped, trying to swat them away. But the more she flailed, the more the hens darted forward, curious and bold. One even pecked at the shiny buttons on her blouse, thinking it was food. "You know," I said casually, leaning on the fence, "the thing about chickens is they don't like invaders. They'll test you until you prove your place. You want to boss everyone around? Maybe it's time you see what it feels like to be bossed by a flock." Her face twisted with fury. "You can't keep me in here. I'll sue you." I laughed, shaking my head. "Go ahead. Tell the judge you broke into my property at midnight and got locked in a chicken coop. I'm sure that'll go well." Rusty suddenly flapped his wings and leapt up onto the roost above her head. His claws scraped the wood, and he let out a guttural crow. Karen ducked, squealing. "Get him away from me." I smirked. "Funny, you're usually the one crowing in this neighborhood. Looks like Rusty's got the job covered tonight." The hens surged closer, brushing against her legs. Karen finally crouched down, arms over her head, as if shielding herself from the feathered onslaught. It was a sight I never thought I'd witness, the woman who bullied the entire neighborhood reduced to a cowering mess inside a coop. And as I stood there watching the self-appointed HOA queen be dethroned by a group of chickens, I realized something important. Revenge doesn't always need fire and fury. Sometimes it only takes feathers, beaks, and a well-timed rooster's crow. Still, I wasn't done teaching her a lesson. Karen had made me look like a fool for months in front of my neighbors. Now it was my turn to make sure everyone saw her for what she really was. Karen crouched low in the coop, feathers tangled in her hair, shoes ruined by straw and droppings. The once perfect image she carried around the neighborhood was gone, stripped away by a flock of chickens who weren't impressed by her titles or threats. But I wasn't about to let the night end quietly. I pulled out my phone and flicked on the video camera. "Smile, Karen," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. The HOA president caught on tape breaking into my chicken coop. "I'm sure the neighbors will love this." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, I dare," I replied, zooming in on her as Rusty strutted proudly in the background. "You've embarrassed half this neighborhood with your petty rules." Time everyone saw the real you, panicking like a hen who lost her egg. She scrambled toward the door, gripping the wire mesh. "Let me out. This isn't funny." "Funny, Karen. This is poetic justice. You've treated everyone like we're beneath you. But tonight, you're on the same level as the chickens you mocked. Consider it a courtroom of feathers." The hens clucked loudly, as if agreeing with me. One even hopped onto her shoulder, balancing like a tiny feathery judge. I couldn't help but laugh, it was too perfect. "Get it off me," she screamed, swatting, but the chicken held her ground, glaring at her with beady little eyes. I leaned closer to the fence. "Karen, do you know what chickens do when someone doesn't belong? They peck, they cluck, and eventually they chase them out. Maybe that's exactly what the neighborhood should do with you." Her bravado cracked completely. "Please, just let me out," she whispered, her voice trembling now. For the first time, she sounded less like a tyrant and more like a defeated neighbor. I let her squirm a little longer, then finally unlatched the door. She bolted out, brushing herself off, muttering threats about lawsuits and revenge, but the damage was already done. The next morning, that video made its way around the neighborhood group chat. And just like I predicted, the so-called queen of the HOA became the laughingstock of the block. Memes popped up overnight: Karen in the coop, Karen with feathers in her hair, Karen cowering under Rusty's crow. She stopped patrolling the street after that. No more bogus fines, no more midnight inspections. The mighty HOA Karen had been dethroned, not by lawyers or police, but by a chicken coop and a little poetic justice. And as I gathered fresh eggs that morning, I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best way to deal with a bully is to let the hens do the talking. And that's how HOA Karen learned the hard way: you don't mess with chickens or with me. If you enjoyed watching her get a taste of her own medicine, make sure to smash that like button. Drop a comment with what you would have done to Karen. And of course, subscribe so you don't miss the last crazy HOA showdown. Trust me, you'll want to see what happens next.